G'day guys, you're here with Ben and Simon as well as Alex from AWS Advisors today on another episode of the Pumped On Property Show. Really appreciated what we did on the Self-Managed Super Fund app. If people haven't checked that one out, Alex was phenomenal and I just geeked out with a whole lot of questions for you. I'm going to equally put you on the spot again today, mate.
Cool. For.
So basically today what Simon and I thought would be cool would be to sort of sit down with you and get a bit of an idea about a longer term financial vision for the future. Now, that's clarity around where you're going. It's peace knowing that in a relatively short period of time with the right plan and accumulating some assets, you're going to be free. And then there's obviously the freedom phase in the future, which is when you're living it up, kicking the feet up and just living your best life down the line, whether that's in retirement or hopefully for most people listening to this, watching this a lot earlier. So what I thought would be cool would be to look at a very, very risk profile person like myself, as well as like a sort of more moderate to high risk sort of person in terms of starting from where we are now to where we could go longer term. We really have back of the napkin this one, so it's going to be a bit of a let's figure it out as we go. But are you okay if we put you on the spot?
Happy to. Yeah. Cool. Let's do it. Yeah.
All right, so Simon and I were just sort of mucking around off camera. So let's say the first example is pretty much someone like the three of us on this lounge. So we're married,
Except the young.
or in a relationship, we're sub 45. You might have kids, or we all have kids. You might not have kids. You could be working for someone else, but you're a bit further along in your career, or you could have your own business. The household income would be somewhere between about 150K a year to some of the ballers that are out there listening to this up to the full 500K a year mark. But we'll probably make this example of maybe 250 a year. Have some savings, or if not savings, which a lot of people don't, really, really good equity either against their own home or their investment property that they own. Super's sitting in that sort of 150 to 400K mark, depending on how aggressive they've been there. A lot of people in this category would already own their own home. And some of them would own somewhere between sort of 1 and 5 properties. So we're talking about like a pretty sophisticated person already. Maybe for today's example, just say their own home looking to step into another property, whether that's in super or outside. How I want to spend my time, this is pretty selfish. As you've seen in the last step, it's pretty much just me asking you questions without me having to pay you for them. But I want to spend more time with my kids, as do most parents, especially like all of us are going hard. There's normally a trade for going hard. Want to help the kids and set up my future family. I sort of want to plan for the future as well. Like for me personally, a lot of my journey was unclear. And probably when I sit down with you to get some help later this year or early next year, you'll probably realize like my long-term plan isn't crystal clear, but my short-term plan is. But a plan for the future retirement where I can have like a comfortable life, do the holidays I want to do, get the cars I want to get, caravan when I want to caravan, help my kids out with things like first home deposits or second home deposits, maybe, looking after their uni, like those sort of more, I'm talking like living a little bit better than just getting by. Kind of in that grind phase of life where I'm like either working or I'm a human taxi for my family right now. And even in my life where I get to talk to like 12 to 20 absolutely phenomenal people per week, not having a huge amount of people in my life that are at the same level and that want the same clarity that I want. With the intention of always retiring early and retiring free. So yeah, I've just sort of a whole lot of stuff there, but that's kind of the position of a lot of people listening to this right now. And then we'll talk about the position of like where I was kind of at and where we've all been at before, which is sort of the younger version, sub 35, where the position's really strong, but you might be on your own. And like what it could look like for someone there. Like I wasn't even thinking financial planning until recently. And I've been an investor for 15 years. So this would be new for a lot of people too. So where do you start? Let's pretend me and Simon are that person. where do you start if, we're having a conversation about goals, vision, and then the plan that comes off the back of that if you're low risk?
Cool.
Sorry, mate, I've just chucked you under the bus.
Where do I jump in? There's a few layers to it, but I think like that's a really, really common set of circumstances for clients that I'm working with. And a lot of the time you have this feeling inside that I should probably be doing more. Like I'm at this level of maybe financial comfort, but look, I can be harnessing my efforts a little bit better. And that's sort of where we come in, because we're trying to identify what you're actually on track for. This is something I think, AWS advisors we really excel at, is modeling out where you're heading with
No plan.
with no plan whatsoever. If you maintain the status quo, where do you end up when you want to stop working? And
Does that freak a lot of people out?
so many people. A lot of the time, it's not pretty. Like, especially if you're self-employed, you're not contributing to super, and you're just grinding away, ferrying the kids around, paying off the home, just in the hustle bustle of life. And you don't put in place those foundations for that financial success when you want to stop working. The numbers aren't great. And in Australia, it's a very, very expensive place to live. We have high tax rates, we have high cost of living, we're borrowing more and more than ever to just be able to afford the family home. The things that were the classic Australian dream feel sometimes further and further away. And yeah, the status quo is not what people are aspiring to.
I don't think anyone listening to this wants to land on the pension. I don't think anyone even listening to this wants to land on less than at least 100 to 200 grand a year of income.
Yeah, that's absolutely my vision, and that the minimum income requirement to live in any sort of city in Australia is 100 grand for a couple. I don't see how you can afford to live on less than that with, even if you paid off the home, you still have rates, you still have utilities, you still got groceries. You probably want to travel. If you want to help out the kids, forget about it if you haven't got yourself set up properly.
And do you know how many times a week I want to go out in retirement? Like for food, I want to be breakfasting it every day pretty much, and like dinnering at least a couple of times a week. I don't want a big life, but I want a life filled with big choices. Absolutely.
There's a term bandied around in the industry that's comfortable retirement. I hate it because there's actually a definition of comfortable retirement. Well, there's actually a definition, and that definition is about $74,000 a year. And they actually go through line by line and say, all right, you can afford to go out once a week for dinner. You can go to a movie once a month, and you've got all this time on your hand. You're retired, man. Like that doesn't sound very comfortable to me. That sounds like a lot of empty, lonely time.
And we've seen, like personally in our family, our grandma end up on proper pension without her own home, and another grandma that just had one home. And then she was able to sell that in the Northern Beaches, and the difference in life quality as their health declined was insane.
So look, I think if we kind of come back to your original question, where do you start? Like how does a person in that situation really get a plan? Well, it's first thing you have to do is identify where you're at right now, and then where you'd like to be. So identifying that gap that you need to bridge is really stage one of figuring out what the next steps are.
So asking a question that we kind of know where we're at based on how I sort of set this up. Where do I want to be? Like, where do you want to be as sort of someone who's in this position yourself? Like, where do you want to be, and how do you go about mapping that out with people? Because it's not the easiest thing for the average person to figure out, well, in 50 years, I want to be here, which is why we always say just start with replacing your current annual salary, but you're a full-on financial advisor. We're just saying that as property people. So where do people generally want to be? Like, what are the big dreams, goals that people normally have?
I agree. I think it's really difficult for people to comprehend, well, in 20 years, what will I be spending a year? That's a really awkward number to try and come up with. So I always find it's better to focus on, well, how do you envision your lifestyle? And if you want to travel, if you want to go out for dinner and brunch every day, but what income do we think is needed to sustain that? And you work your way backwards. So you say, if that's the lifestyle I want, well, I need this level of income. And to generate that level of income, I need this level of assets.
Love that. So just reverse engineering it back.
Correct. Now we have a target in mind of what we need to achieve.
Which is a soft goal of like, this is the lifestyle, this is what it looks and feels like and tastes like.
Yep.
And this is what I need to sustain that in a very hard dollar figure that you can reverse engineer back to a series of assets.
Yeah, and it's just really important to know that it's so personal. There is no, every couple in Australia should be on $200,000 a year in retirement. I mean, that'd be nice, but it's very much dependent on what you want to do, therefore what income you need. And how can we as financial planners build a strategy that helps you achieve that outcome? For me, that's the role of a financial advisor, a good one at least, is listening to the client, understanding, their wants, needs, beliefs, and trying to tailor a strategy that fits in with that and gives them the best chance of success. Yeah.
I love
So yeah, look, a couple like that would say, look, you need to not just pay off your own home. If you're going to stop working, how do we replace that income? How do we generate that passive income? For me, like the reason I'm sitting on this couch is I'm very pro property as a retirement income vehicle, because when you're 65, 70, and you're trying to play with the grandkids, do you really want to be concerned with how your share portfolio is performing that particular day? And if you're going to get the dividends required to be able to, travel down for Christmas to see the kids? No, you want to know for sure you can maintain that lifestyle and you need that income. So
let's say
have as much external influence on those things.
that's it.
So let's say in this example, someone is aiming for the stars and wants 150 to 200K. What types of assets would people accumulate early? And then how would the transition to retirement look?
Yeah, great question. Because with any financial plan, it's not one plan at the start that will be the same throughout your whole working life.
Oh yeah.
It changes, it ebbs and flows, and you're constantly refining and altering that strategy for where you are in life at the moment. So whilst you're building assets, you might be focusing on things with high capital growth because you're just trying to build out the total portfolio that you own. And then as you get closer to that retirement age, well, you're like, well, okay, I've got these properties that maybe might be worth, $2 million combined, but they're not paying me the income I need to maintain that lifestyle. So you need a shift in assets. There might need to be some sales to improve the total income out of your portfolio. It's constantly a shift towards what you want to achieve in that moment.
Yeah, a lot of people would say that, but Alex, I don't want to pay tax. Like I don't want to lose all of this money to capital gains in selling that. Like, how do you navigate around some of those challenges that people often face?
Yeah, there's a lot of little tips and tricks that we can employ to minimize tax along the way. Look, some tax is okay to pay. I think it's okay to say that out loud because that means you've made a profit, okay? So
Paying tax, you made some money.
you never pay tax if you never make a profit. It's just about how we manage that and be smart and strategic about it. So look, would you trade a $100,000 capital gains tax bill if it means you can shift money into super and have a $10,000 a year smaller tax bill every year? After 10 years, you're well ahead. So it's about understanding the trade-offs and making intentional choices with your financial plans and altering that as your circumstances changes. Look, if you have a pay rise, if there's an unexpected inheritance, how can you use all of the tools in your toolbox to maximize your chance of success? That's really what we're doing here. Yeah.
One of the strategies that we employ is what we call the 3 properties to financial freedom. So again, it was based on, I've got a goal in 30 years time of 200K a year of passive income. Not necessarily adjusted for inflation, but just the equivalent of that today. And so we go out and we accumulate 3 houses. Let's say that they're worth $700,000 each. So 7, 14, 21. We're sitting on $2.1 million worth of assets once we accumulate those properties. And those properties are each renting for $50,000 a year today because we've set them up in a way that you know that we like, houses with granny flats. So the income's much, much better. And so if they go up by just under 5% per year, in 15 years' time, the $2.1 million of property will be 4.2. If they go up by 5% a year again for the next 15 to year 30, we're going to be sitting on about 8.4 mil. If we sit on the rent today of 150K across the 3 properties and it goes up by about 2.5% for 30 years, we're going to be sitting on well over 200K of gross income. And so when we're talking about how to get to a number, it's as simple as back of the napkin stuff like us. That's what we prescribe/do. But as a financial advisor, like let's say that was the path that I took as this person that we're speaking about here. Is that a good path, or is there more intricacies into that, like things that you've seen people do that are strategic and smart with like super or stocks, or what would I do with that portfolio once I get to 60?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And I think there are a lot more layers and intricacies to it because as lovely as it would be if we lived in a vanilla world that was always growing at the same rate year on year, the reality is that markets are wild.
They burn up. They're up and down.
And, you might have 20% growth on a property one year and a flatline the next.
And a minus 12 the year after. We've seen all that in the last 5 years.
We absolutely have. So it's identifying the actual pros and cons of your overall portfolio and pivoting it accordingly. So look, if you identified that, all right, you bought a unit on the Gold Coast because that's what you could afford at the time, and it's gone from $500,000 to $750,000, but we know there's a whole host of extra apartment supply hitting the market, and that market's probably going to hit a ceiling. Well, in my eyes, it's better to crystallize that capital gain and move your assets into another asset that has better potential for growth
versus sitting flat while the Goldie market sorts itself out over the next 12 years. And again, we're not talking Goldie, it's just an example.
Yeah,
exactly. But also I do know that the Skyline's going to double in the next 5 years, so maybe don't buy Goldie units. FYI.
No, absolutely. What buying an asset at the time, like you're trying to identify an asset that has really good potential at the moment and hopefully for the future. But as we know, markets change and you need to always be analyzing your portfolio and identify, look, that's not working for me anymore. It would be great if, we could buy those 3 properties now and it would just naturally grow to $2 million. But the reality is we need to continue to analyze it, make the changes and ensure that we're bridging that gap and improving our chance of success and reaching those outcomes.
I would assume that's going to speed up the journey as well. If you are being more flexible rather than rigid and, moving with the markets. We talk time and time again on this podcast about real estate cycles. And if you can employ an investment strategy well that uses these cycles to your advantage, like we've talked about it off camera, how much faster you can achieve your goals as well. And it's like, for some reason, when people are thinking in decades or thinking about real estate, they don't get too caught up in those minute differences between one property versus another, like selling one to reinvest into another market. And some people get that winner's bias as well, where they've held a property, it's performed so well. So they're like, well, I'm never going to sell this thing. It's been the best performing asset in my portfolio. But little do they know that might, be the peak in the cycle and it could sit flat for 5, if not 10 or more years.
There's 3 things that I wanted to say to that to just help people that are sitting out there and going, this is all well and good theoretically, but, tips and tricks like that we've picked up over the course of our experience from buying, I think, $600 million worth of property now. I would say, number 1, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, when we analysed 50 years worth of data and divided the total return divided by the number of years, averaged, Brisbane was 9.7%, Sydney was 9.6%, Melbourne was 9.5%, Perth was 8.2%. Then Simon Priestley went on to look at every market in Australia, and over the 50 years until 2024, an 8.2% was the average gain. but that isn't a compounded. It would be nice if it was an 8.2 compounded. It was a total return. So the first thing that we know is that high quality capital cities and major regional markets with a population over 200,000 people do better in Australia because there's more jobs, there's more blah, blah, blah. The second thing that we know when choosing property, which comes back to your asset allocation before, I do believe that it's possible for the average person to get 5% a year compounded if they follow that first rule and this second one. And the second rule is markets boom and bust, but people don't see it because it's over a 20-year cycle. And so a bust to me isn't necessarily like a 30% drop like you see in America. It's actually nothing happening above inflation for a 10-year period. So between the 9 years leading up to 2011 in Sydney, property prices in Sydney went up less than 1% per annum. Then from 2012 to 2020, prices doubled. The same thing effectively occurred in Melbourne. Perth had 14 flat years up until 2017. And from 2017, seeing how it's doubled. Same with Brisbane. It had 11 flat years up until that point. And so what we found from some more research from Jeremy Shepherd at DSR is markets that crank in the first 10-year period that go up 8 to 10% per year on average generally have a underperforming second 10-year period. Markets that do worse in the first 10 years outperform in the second. And so the average 20-year growth rate for most of these markets will be 5% plus, as you know from your history as well. I think it's 11% according to John Lindemann over 100 years in Australia is the average. But that doesn't mean that I want to be sitting flat for 10 years or 12 years waiting for Perth to recover while 300,000 miners bail until it goes good again.
Especially if you are watching another market go off its head at the same time.
So what we actually look for statistically, which is the closest in property that I've ever found, is markets that have done less in that. You can literally Google like Cronulla, St Kilda, Geelong, wherever, Brisbane, the suburb name plus average annual growth rate 10 years, and you'll find a percentage which is generally between 1%. Some suburbs in Townsville, some suburbs in Darwin, a few suburbs in Perth look like this right now. And then you'll see other suburbs that have done 10, 12, 13% like you're seeing on the sunny coast, Byron, Gold Coast right now, Geelong. And it's like you just want to be on the lower side in a quality market, the higher the potential chances for short-term gains. I don't know why I just ranted on all that, but I want people to know that there can be a method within the madness of buying. And I suppose it was to just counteract, because I do believe that people can average a 5% return, but not without following those few rules. And who wants just a 5% when you can do much better than that by moving your money around yourself?
Think about the amount of tax that you do have to pay versus the opportunity cost that you're losing by not investing in the other market and holding it in the underperforming market. It could offset it, if not outperform it.
Yeah, I agree. The opportunity cost is massive, and doing nothing is a choice, and that can have really bad consequences. So sometimes people are maybe afraid to take the next step in their investment journey. They think, oh, look, it's performed well for me so far, I'm going to stick with it. But just understand that there are consequences to any choice. And so if you're not properly analyzing the merits of the investment asset itself, then you're doing yourself a massive disservice.
Yeah. Love that. And so as an advisor, I'm assuming there's an upfront piece where you get clarity and a plan for people, but then there's also a, hey mate, I'll just bill you for an hour to like review where you're at and what's going on and just double check the asset class so that they can pivot to a new plan or a better one as well.
Yeah. So look, it would be really nice if we could set up a plan, set and forget. That's it. All you have to do, next 20 years, you sort it. That would make my job so much easier. Actually, the main benefit is being able to objectively analyze your portfolio and make the changes necessary to keep pushing on for success. So our preferred method is to not be transactional. We don't want to just give you a piece of advice and send you off into traffic. Good luck. I want to build a relationship with clients. Our model is that the client pays us, no one else. So we're invested in the client's success. The more they succeed, the more they're going to stick around. If we're not doing a good job, they quickly go away.
And in these plans, like let's say that I have theoretically in this position got my own home and these 3 houses give me 150K per year of income worth 2.1 mil. What happens, just theoretically for me personally, as I get to 60, what would be like some of the ideas? Like let's say that I've just got the shits with a $5 million to $8 million property portfolio, theoretically from holding it for 8 years based on those numbers. And I've got the shits with renovating it every 5 years, maintaining it, insurances, land taxes, rates, water, management, maintenance. And I just go, dude, I'm stuck here because it was a great return, $1,000 a week on a 700K purchase. But $1,500 a week on a $2 million property isn't, as good a cash flow return anymore. And now I want to eat the cash because this is how I'm going to live. So what types of ideas have you seen in your industry that they explore at that stage of life in the transition?
Yeah. The classic industry answer would be, just pop it in an annuity and guarantee you 2.5% return for life.
Like a cash in bank account.
And there's zero residual value that goes on to your loved ones.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a failure of planning, because especially like if you've got a family and you want to leave a nest egg to them, and you want to leave that generational wealth, why are you burning through your asset base? Why are you like selling off all the assets and burning through the cash? What you really want are sustainable income streams. So if property has burned you out, then shift to an income-focused portfolio. It might not be shares themselves. It might be bond-focused. It might be private credit. There may be some term deposits. It's part of a diversified portfolio that fits your particular needs at that moment. But
so it's like this little one, where you put 25% might generate 4% as a bond, and this one might do 7%, and this one might have a bit more risk and do 9%. This one might do.
And across all those assets, we get to the $200,000 a year that we want.
So you can be that prescriptive on some of these things as you help people. Maybe not at this stage when a 30-year-old's coming in and doesn't need to know that, but as they mature and age to that point, there's multiple solutions that can come out the back based on their risk profile and desire to be active or inactive.
Yeah, I think the flaw in some people's logic is that if they set things up now, that they can't ever, change how they're invested later in life. If anything, you should be, because your appetite for risk is going to be significantly lower when you're in your 60s and you haven't got time to let markets recover. So you can't really afford for your portfolio to evaporate overnight.
We could use our dad as an example there, like successful businessman doing quite well, has been burnt from his financial advisor, making mistakes over the decades, and, has been hit by many crises. He's an almost 70-year-old man, but like, he's just like, stuff it. Like, I've got mine in a high interest term deposit because I'm just sick of the instability of anything else that I've been in the past.
Yeah, and his risk profile is really, really low, and he's not an investor. So it makes sense for our dad to get 3.1 to 5% on his money and not have to go through a 50% dip in the next GFC.
Yeah. And if you have the asset base that you can invest that conservatively and produce the income you need, that's fantastic. What a great position to be in. Really, it's just about how can we generate the income we need from the asset base that we have available to us. Once you're retired, like, you're not accumulating wealth anymore, really, you're drawing on it. And there are two ways to do that. You either, start selling assets, and we call it decumulate your asset base. So, 1 year you might get $100,000 of income, but you need $150,000, so you sell off $50,000 of shares. The next year, well, you've sold off some capital, so you only get $95,000 of income. You've got to sell off $55,000, and it snowballs into how much you're selling off. And you introduce a thing called longevity risk, where you may outlive your retirement savings. That's a really bad position to be in, because then what do you have? Well, the safety net is the government age pension, but that's not so crash hot. In a perfect world, clients I'm sitting down with, we get them to an asset position where they can live entirely on the income from their portfolio. They never need to sell off assets. because then you can never outlive your asset base.
I love that. And like I was listening to a guy, Gary Brecker, talk recently, and it's like right now, most people in like Australia are living to their mid 80s. He was saying that, like, you know, people that are under the age of 40 have the capacity based on this new information to live to 120. And he even said 140.
Yep.
So it's like, you know, we're adding many, many, many decades onto our life with
If I live to like 100,
and modern technology. And it's like, this becomes so important.
Like if you retire at 60 and live to 95, 100 beyond, that is such a long period of time to fund. And if you're anticipating that you'd sell off $60,000 a year to fund your retirement,
Need a lot in there when you see.
you need a hell of a lot. A much better position is just to work really hard to create the bigger asset base at the start that you don't need to sell things off each year.
What you're saying is just deal with the pain. Deal with the pain of tenants.
off camera, we said like this doesn't happen without a plan, without discipline, without consistency, especially for those of us, which is most people listening, that want financial freedom earlier. Because no one's listening to this because they want to be financially free at 67 and a half. And like we're talking about people here want to be financially free at 30, 40, 50. Like all of us sitting here want to be retired by 50, but doing meaningful service-based work that still fills the cup and helps the next generation up.
I'm a huge advocate for people, you know, having those aspirations, having those goals that they are targeting, you know, a certain lifestyle by a certain age, and definitely before age 67. And that's cool if you have a plan for that. For that period before you can access super, well, you know, I need this amount of income to maintain the lifestyle I want. Have I got a plan for that income stream?
So knowing your lifestyle is one of the most important parts when you're beginning to plan these things. So having an idea of like the types of activities, travel, you know, people that I want to be surrounding myself with, areas that I want to live, because we know in Australia, you live in Sydney, it's much more expensive for you to live in Sydney than it is for us to live on the Sunshine Coast. So it's like having an idea of like where you're headed. But that's a difficult question to answer as well for a lot of people that are in their 20s or 30s or even 40s. So it's like, how do we go about understanding that? I guess it's more philosophical than financial.
Well, just I believe it's simple, and so do you. And that is, if you're living the lifestyle that you kind of want to live at the moment, but you're having to work, then like whatever you're earning is I think it's a great start point. So if you're on 100K, figure out how to replace 100K before you retire, plus hopefully another 100K once you've retired in your super. You know, to me, it's not rocket science. It's just going, if I want to retire early, then my salary with all of my time back would be a great place to start, and my own home and outright. If I want more than that, which I do, then, you know, let's talk about that. We went deep in the last video, but you've got this outside of super stuff, which could be your own home. It could be stocks, a combination of all those other asset classes and property. But then you've got this incredible vehicle, which is super, which is almost forcing you to have that consistency and discipline if you can match it with the right clarity and plan. So what can people do to like supercharge where they can end up based on like super self-managed super funds and things like that? Again, not people like me, like this person, you know what I mean, that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, look, if you are you in the position where you've built up a reasonable asset base now and you're at a good level of income, well, it's about using all the tools available to you to keep pushing forward. So that might be using the bank's money to leverage up, to buy investments, knowing that will help your portfolio grow, which will result in this sort of income. So yeah, you might say, look, I'm going to go buy a property in a self-managed fund, and for the first 15 years, that's going to be a high growth strategy. I'm going to target a property with a large land holding because I know land really is what goes up in value. The property itself is a depreciating asset, but the land, that's what appreciates. So can I find something that's a good fit for that strategy to build my asset base? And then maybe as you're closing in on retirement, you sell that, pay minimal capital gains in super, and pivot to a higher income property or a higher income different asset class. And It's just about understanding and being really honest with yourself about where you're at right now and the gap that you still need to close. Yeah.
So it's always starting with growth, and that's what everybody needs, like in the beginning of their journey, and then eventually transitioning into this higher yield, higher cash flow, higher income.
I mean, unless you're a really privileged position and you've got a multi-million-dollar inheritance coming your way in the next couple of years, then most aspirational people, most people listening to this podcast are going to want to grow their asset base.
Absolutely.
And so how do they do that with as little risk as possible? Because that's part of working with a professional advisor is not just identifying the investment opportunities and the strategies, but understanding your tolerance to risk and fitting that in with the strategy. Like if you're in your 60s and okay, your asset portfolio isn't where you want it to be, you probably still haven't got a huge appetite for risk, gamble at all. You've got to really understand how you feel about negative market movements. What's your risk appetite? And then build the strategy from there. Yeah.
I really like that. So an example of someone that's in their 30s, 40s or 50s that is in the good financial position that we've been talking about could be a combination of your own home, maybe one to a number of assets like property assets outside of super, one to a number of assets property-wise inside super. It could be a collection of other things depending on your risk profile too. And again, we're property focused because I like leverage, that there's a lot of people that get stocks or commodities or crypto or something else that's completely outside of my scope. So someone coming to you like that's in this position that maybe owns their own home, has a good amount of cash in super and a good amount of equity, like where do they start? Like what does a plan for someone like that start with? Is it just as simple as like getting a plan, getting clarity and getting that first property in place and then dusting yourself off and figuring out what's next from there? Or is it just mapped out for the next 15 years and it's just taking one step at a time based on that plan?
I'm always hesitant to map out things for 15 years, 20 years and say, right, well, after 5 years, your property portfolio will grow into this, you'll be able to refinance. I don't like to make assumptions on assumptions.
Unless it doesn't. And then it's or that didn't.
So what I like to really model out with clients is what's achievable right now, knowing that as your circumstances continue to improve, there's scope to invest further. And based on what you can do right now, based on historical growth rates, where does that end up? What outcome does that result in? If that's not enough, then when you have the capacity, you need to go again. You need to continue taking the next steps in your investment journey. But I'm always hesitant to say, right, well, this will be what you do year 1, then year 5, you'll take this next step, then year 10. There's just too many assumptions built into that.
And like, even if you do, all of these external influences will have an impact. I guess if we look at the last 5 years in Australia, it's been a very prosperous 5 years, obviously bumpy, and there's been lots of crazy things that have happened. But at the end of the day, stocks, property and all asset classes have gone up significantly more so than the longer term historic averages. So it's like, okay, this asset, this property has performed better than we expected in a shorter period of time. We've really got to look at potentially doing something with that property to, go target more capital growth or whatever. And then, what happens with the opposite if you buy and it's like, oh, I accidentally made a mistake. I bought in an oversupplied market and it sort of underperformed when I thought it was going to overperform.
Which is the more common thing because we buy at the tops of markets because it feels safe and it's got the recency bias and history and everybody else is going that way versus, hey, maybe like Darwin or Melbourne or Townsville or parts of Brisbane look really good right now because people it's not on their radar.
Yeah, I love this. We're kind of almost stepping away from financial planning really and going into like the philosophy, the psychology of investing. And that's why we sort of refer to, in my business, people's personal wealth story, because it's so colored by your previous investment experience, and your choices that you then make are impacted by that, by how well you've done. You may think you're the next Warren Buffett. Probably not.
Definitely.
The reality is, well, probably not.
Did you start at 12?
Most people get a bit lucky, and it's okay to be lucky. It's great to be lucky.
it.
Yeah, I'd rather be lucky than good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you can be great and perform really poorly in markets. Because there are too many external variables. So you need to be honest with yourself of where your expertise lies. Most people coming to me excel in their fields. That's right. Why they're earning a lot of money. That's why they've got an existing investment portfolio, but they're probably not the experts in actually building wealth. And so by partnering with a team, that's what you're doing. You're acknowledging your own shortcomings, which is easier said than done for everyone in all aspects of life. But identifying where you don't have the knowledge and you need to lean on other professionals, there's no shame in that. I think it just enables your success. And that's what I would care about at the end of the day, achieving the lifestyle I want. How I got there, couldn't care less.
Me too. So true. I think everybody listening to this would absolutely agree with that as well.
So just rounding out, again, to sort of play devil's advocate like Simon did in the last one. So let's say that I'm coming in this time younger, I'm single or I'm in a relationship, but it's not super serious. Maybe my partner's not contributing to my next buy. Maybe they are. Most of the time working with someone else in that 100 to 250K range type thing. So very established as well. May just have savings in this case, may have equity from one or a number of properties, or their own home. Super sitting at that 150 to sort of 200K mark. And at this point, this is me pre sort of 35, if I didn't have kids super young. So my journey just went much quicker into like a married family stage of life. But, I want to be traveling, spending time with people I care about, friends, family. I understand that the push that it's required me at a younger age, like sub 40 to get to that sort of income level it has a burn as well. And I don't necessarily want to feel that burn as much, which is why I want to get clear on a plan and a strategy. Health super important as well, obviously. Could be renting and investing, which so many people we both work with do. Could be buying a home, type vibes. So for that person, obviously the story starts in the same place, which is where you are and where you want to be, and sort of reverse engineering it back. But again, what's a nice first step that people that aren't going to reach out to me or you or any advisor can take to sort of better their financial position longer term? Like, what are some of the ideas?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's also about recognizing your circumstances are going to change drastically over the decades that come, right? So where you're at right now isn't where you're going to be in a few years' time, and what you need to do now is take advantage of where you're at in the present. So if you're earning a really high income and you have a really high tax bill, maybe we want to invest in a way that can give you some relief there while still building assets over the long term. Because at the moment, you have that surplus cash flow. You have that ability to direct income into building your asset portfolio. But look, you may meet someone the very next day, shotgun wedding, you've got a kid in 9 months' time. Who knows? Like, think life happens. And then very quickly, your ability to invest like that changes. So invest appropriately for where you're at right now, knowing that it won't always be like that.
With an eye on the future too.
Yeah, correct. So look, you need to invest. If you're on a high income, try and get yourself some tax relief. Try and build out your asset base. One of the hardest things in Australia is to be single in terms of building wealth, because it's not all of a sudden magically 50% cheaper to live. Cost of housing alone is astronomical, especially in some of the capital cities. So when you factor that in, and as with our progressive tax system, if you're earning a huge amount, you're also paying a huge amount in tax, and your ability to build wealth is actually restricted by being single. And so you need to sort of acknowledge that fact and allow for it in your plan.
It's interesting you say that because I remember like I bought my first two investment properties like outside of my relationship with Lise. And then I bought my third one, which is my home. At that time, she was working literally at Kmart or Target. I've had this convo with her for years. I can't remember which one it was. But she was studying full time and she was making about 15, 20K a year. It wasn't much. Um, and she coming on to help me service, like my ability to borrow money went from like 300K to like 600 grand just with her little top up because they saw it as like, well, if something happens to me, there's still income coming in. And I was just blown away, like at the benefit from even just a servicing perspective.
It enables so much having two income streams in the household. And so because effectively the bank don't say that, oh, if there's only one of you, your expenses are 50%, or if there's two of you, it's double it. They kind of go about, oh, there's two of you, expenses might bump up to 70%. So that extra bit of income allows a lot more servicing. But equally, if you're single, then you need to be even more strategic because you haven't got that helping hand, that second income stream. So, and no one's giving you a helping hand. So you need to really plan out, well, how can I take advantage of what I'm doing well right now to maybe build out and achieve my goals?
So maybe like a stepping stone, theoretically, like you said, it is not a one thing for everyone's position. Some people might have a monster preference towards business, stocks, another asset class, or property. The reason, like we talked about in the last potty together, that we like property is if you've got 200K in the bank and you can make 8% in the stock market, you've made 16K. If you've got 200K in the bank and buy $1 million property and it goes up 7%, you've made 70K. 16 versus 70 in 1 year makes year two a fucking lot easier. And wait till year 15. And so a nice starting point for people, which is the same place that I started from, was like property made sense. I could use leverage. It was very simple. And there are people that have been doing it for a long time that can really help in terms of that team of advice as well. So maybe property, like in the right market at the right time, using some of those things we talked about earlier in the potty, can be a nice starting point. And then when should people in that position come and seek formal financial advice? Because I didn't even know I could, honestly, until I was about 32. Like I didn't realize there were people that were way smarter than me that I could just physically sit with. Or do you encourage, whether you're in the like very established stage of life when people are doing that stuff versus the like just getting it together phase, like how much better you can be longer term with the right plan is just not like black and white, really.
Like I might be a little bit biased here, but I don't think there's ever too early a stage to come and seek financial advice. Look, guidance, like as your career progresses, as your finances develop, you need advice on different things. So sometimes like I have clients as young as 20 who are like, look, I've just been signed, like I've got my first job out of uni. I need help, figuring out which super fund to use. And I want to take out some income protection insurance. So that might be a conversation we have early. And then by the time you're 30, 35, it develops a little bit, but there's no stage where it's all of a sudden right. It's about realizing with yourself, like, do I want that guidance? Do I want that plan in place wherever I am on the investment journey?
I think a lot of people struggle, and one of the challenges that I consistently hear is like people are worried about making a mistake. We all work so hard to earn the money that we earn and to save the money that we save, and we don't want to waste that. So a lot of people bury their head in the sand and just don't do anything and like will just continue saving and missing out on opportunity. Other people will take the wrong advice from the wrong people. And I think about myself and you, and it's like, I haven't made as many mistakes, but still some mistakes have been made, and you've made countless mistakes by doing it alone. So it's like being proactive rather than reactive is always a smarter way to go about finances. So it's like the sooner that you can get that conversation started and put that plan in place and gain that financial clarity, then the more confident that you'll be in as an investor. And it comes back to the, more the psychological side of these things as well. It's like if you start well and you succeed early, you get this like, positive bias in your mind, but then you're also still surrounded by the right team of advisors that are guiding you through that journey, going, hey, that property's done insanely well. You've absolutely nailed it. That stock's gone incredibly well. You've nailed it. Let's pivot now. And you just avoid making those mistakes that everybody's worried about if you do get the conversation started sooner.
That was actually something that I wanted to ask, what are, whether I'm single and earlier in my career or much more established and in a relationship with my own home or investments, what are some of the pitfalls or the common traps that you see people fall into that aren't exploring the combo that we're having today?
Yeah, I think one of the main things I see is not understanding your investment horizon. So especially when it comes to things like super, people might go, oh, look, I'm not confident investing in markets. I might go more of a moderate conservative portfolio, but they're 20. There's 40 years until they can access those funds. They should be taking on as much risk as they feel comfortable with, and probably a little bit more, because you have so much time to ride the roller coaster. So if you have 4 bad years out of 20, say, you're in a high growth portfolio, but you've got 40 years until you can access it, you should be, higher risks will generally correlate with higher returns over the long term. So understanding that your investment horizon is that many years means you should take on more risk, versus someone who's in their 50s, they should actually be taking down growth model. Well, it might go poorly for them. They might be, hitting 65 right as the next GFC hits.
And I've heard this, you can lose 50% of your stock value, but you need 100% return to get back just to the same number.
Yeah.
We saw it happen to our dad in the last GFC. We saw it happen to so many clients during the mid-cycle slowdown, which was COVID, where stocks did 37 to 50% declines depending on where we're at. And our mum got into cash and then reinvested after it.
Yeah.
It was just, and that was off the advice of Phil Anderson, who wrote the book, The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, and Akil, who's behind us here as well, that wrote The Secret Wealth Advantage. It's not people's first lap around the sun. And I think sometimes you've got to recognize that. These guys have looked at hundreds of years of UK and American history, and there's no crystal ball, but you can remember the past as well, you know what I mean? And you can use that to make better decisions. Putting you on the spot, but I've been looking at it at the moment too. You can just Google 10-year average S&P or 10-year average ASX, 20-year, 30-year. There's 125 years worth of data that you can go back and look at. And it's phenomenal, the returns in property, Australian property especially. And then because of our banking system, just how stable it is compared to Americans, where it's ninja loans are being lent right now on no income. Here's a house. It's that market is going to boom and bust the same as Australia is, but it's the Australian banking system forces us as a culture to be a lot more conservative.
Yeah, it's very true. It's such a secure system, and really GFC, APRA forced the banks to hold a lot more liquid capital in reserve. So the stability of our banking system means that they can lend at lower rates and have a much more, you can be a lot more secure investing in property, knowing that it's a much more stable market. So,
but that said, big asterisks there. You look at the charts Simon and I do year by year, and it's there's some scary years. Stocks definitely, but property as well. I've been in this business for 10 years now, and I've seen Sydney on 3 occasions drop between 12 to 15%. It just didn't finish the year that bad because confidence came back, and people felt the blood in the water. But these things happen. I've seen Brisbane prices drop on 3 occasions now. Melbourne, Perth, man. Before it was a winner, it was a drop 37%.
can be a bloodbath. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I suppose just that longer term approach buffers a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and I guess coming back to your original question on what are the pitfalls, what are the ways people can make mistakes, I think it's trying to time the market too much. What we've seen from all of the research is that time in the market is better than trying to time the market. rather than trying to buy and sell and be too active in your investments, you're actually better to, because inevitably you'll sell when things are down and things feel bad, and you'll sell on the way down, and then you'll end up buying back in when things are on the way up. What you end up doing is buying at a higher price than you otherwise would have. You're crystallizing tax along the way. It's a really poor return on investment over time. Historically, people who are overly active in managing their investments like that will experience the worst days and then miss the best days because they're normally clustered together.
Yeah.
When we saw in 2020, with COVID, all the news hitting in March, markets performed really, really poorly in 2020. But then 2021, one of the best years on record.
It's funny you say that because I just went back and looked at like a chart, which is so good, like year by year for 100 and something years, 120 odd years in Australia, the ASX 200, I think, or 100 it was profiling. And what I noticed as someone who like seeks patterns was every time there was a heavy down year of more than 25%, and there were some years that like 69% declines within 18 months. So directly in the 2 years after it might have, generally it was in the first year after, but almost always in the second year after, whatever the decline was, the average up was even higher. Yeah. So even in those 70% drop years, it was like within 2 years that it recovered 84% of its value. So it's, this dollar cost averaging thing or buying in consistently that you guys talk about, but Tony Robbins really explores in the Money Master the Game book. What do they say? Like if you miss the 10 best years over the last 50, your returns would have gone from an average of 9% to 4%.
Yep.
It's just, I think, being in the market. And I'm a very active investor. I'm really hearing what you're saying right now in terms of just allowing things to average out over time is a lot safer. I'd be in an exponentially better position if I just held on to some of the best stuff I ever bought.
Look, sometimes it takes someone who's objective, taking, an independent view of your finances, because we have so many biases, we have so much baggage around money and finances. So, we tend to overreact or buy in at the wrong time. If you have an advisor saying, look, I know markets are bad, we're going to stay in, you'll probably outperform than if you had tried to sell down and then buy back in. And so having that impartial view on your finances is where I think a lot of the value comes in, and look, getting that coaching and mentorship. And I think a lot of my role as an advisor is educating clients so that they're more comfortable with the decisions that they're making. It's like inevitably together as a team, we'll make mistakes. Not perfect. Still, we're all still human.
Of course.
And psychology plays a part in how we invest. But if we are learning from those mistakes and continuing to make smart strategic decisions that improve things over time, then I can see only benefit from having that relationship. Yeah.
Another question, just circling back a little bit as well about this idea of time in the market. And going away from the timing the market, but time in the market. And do you have an opinion or any advice in relation to the idea, and throwing a bit of a curveball here, buying a property earlier in your journey, say 20s or 30s, compared to your 40s or 50s, and essentially locking in the debt at that point in time. And then you've got this asset that's appreciating in value, but your debt is either staying the same or decreasing in value. So once again, just motivating people to get started at an earlier stage of life. Have you ever thought about that? Do you have any ideas around that?
About just locking in investments early and then just riding that wave up, or?
Yeah, so it's just the idea of you buy a property today for, let's say, $600,000 with a $100,000 deposit. So you got a $500,000 debt. That $500,000 debt won't go up with inflation. So you've got the asset that's going up in value over time, but then that debt is locked in place. So you're making more money than, had have you either stayed on the sidelines or had have you, maybe invested in a different asset class because you're not locking the money in at today's values.
And you're talking is like money, like the value of your income goes up, but the debt stays the same, and then you can repay it with future income, which is significantly higher than today's.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all of those factors have to come into your overall financial plan. Like as you have that equity uplift, how can you then harness that to take the next step to keep trying to march towards those goals? Understanding that, yes, your debt is not indexed. Yes, you pay interest, but hopefully the tenant's helping you out a fair bit on that side of things. But yeah, look, you have an appreciating asset, and understanding the value of leverage there. Like I think a lot of people also don't understand the return on, they should be looking at not the growth of the value over time, the asset value over time. So, if $1 million property goes to 1.1, they think that's 10% growth. Actually, what you're getting is $100,000 growth on your initial seed investment.
Which could, for some people, feel like a 50% return if it's 200K down.
200K down, you've got 100%, you've got $100,000 growth on that. That's actually what you should be measuring your return on.
Like the cash on cash return.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Just while we're here, like we may as well, because these things just go down the rabbit hole. Where do you sit on cash deposits personally for your clients versus using equity and therefore taking on more leverage? Like, I've only ever used cash for deposits personally for all of the properties I've ever bought, but most of my clients would be on equity. Do you have a personal preference towards either of them?
Yeah, I think you just have to understand the cash flow of it all. It's a conscious decision. If you are putting down cash, then you're only borrowing the 80%. If you're using equity, you're effectively 100% financing the next transaction, because you might grab the 20% deposit from another property, but then there's debt secured against that one of the 20%, and the remaining 80% secured against the new property. There's 100% debt there versus 80%. So your cash flow is going to be worse if you're borrowing effectively the full amount, even if you can't take out 100% mortgage on a property. So even though some is secured against the old property, you're still borrowing that amount anyways.
Exactly.
So using a cash deposit, you might choose to do so if you're more concerned about the cash flow, the overall cash flow, because the mortgage repayments against the new property are going to be the same. But if you've taken equity from another property, well, that mortgage repayment is going to jump. So your overall repayments are higher in that scenario than if you use a cash deposit. So it's just an understanding of the cash flow.
And I love that. But what I also see a lot of people do, and this is more of an older school mentality, it's like you buy your own home, you pay off the debt on your own home. And, I've talked to a lot of people that have, done that. And then they're like, amazing, I paid off the debt on my own home. Now I want to invest in property, but I got no cash. So I'm going to use equity in my property that I've just paid off. Is that a common idea that a lot of people have, with that, I guess, old school mentality? I want to buy my home, I want to pay off the debt as soon as possible, but then they get to, their late 40s or 50s, they've done this, and then they're like, okay, well, great, I've got a debt-free home.
I can't eat it.
Yeah.
It's not producing income and I'm still having to go to work.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, how do I get free?
Well, I always tell clients, the one thing that you can never get back is time. So if you wait until you pay your whole home off and then invest, if you take out a 30-year mortgage in your 20s, you're in your 50s, and you're retiring at 60, 65, you've got a very short horizon in which to invest and build wealth outside of the home. So you can't bring back those decades you've already spent paying off the home. I'm not saying you shouldn't pay off the home. I'm just saying there are different strategies to do so. And actually harnessing the equity in your home earlier and getting the investments, getting the foundations in place earlier means you have that compounding growth over time where your whole portfolio can grow to much larger.
Time in the market,
correct. Look, you may still have a strategy that you're going to use the equity, you're going to build these foundations, and what we refer to in the industry are exit strategies. What's your exit strategy for that debt? So if it's the home that you've borrowed against to seed the investments, you need to recognize maybe one of them is a sacrificial lamb that helps you then repay off the debt on the home. but along that time, you've had an appreciating asset outside of the home. So that's one way to clear debt. Yeah, the old school mentality is you're going to do it through blood, sweat, and tears, personal cash flow, non-tax deductible debt. You're going to aggressively pay off that mortgage, and it's going to take you 30 years. It's going to be a horrible experience. Actually, if you utilize some of that equity earlier on, build out a property portfolio, eventually, yes, sell some things, maybe pay some capital gains, clear the debt, you're still left with investments outside of the home that have grown over decades, and you've had more time in the market. So
We call them partner properties. Like there's properties that I'll hold to retirement, and then there's these sacrificial lambs that we call partner properties, which are effectively, I'll buy this joint in 15 years based on history. I hope I can sell it for twice what I paid for it. I may choose to pay off a little bit of debt on that during that time. I might just keep it at interest only, and then I'll sell it. I'll pay a whopping amount of capital gains tax, but I'll still be left with a lot more than I could have blood, sweat, and teared it out. And I'll just whack that straight off my own home or off a property. And I suppose that's where the old rule comes from. For every property you want to own outright, own one more to pay it off.
yeah, no, I love that concept of partner properties.
Such as, like, for me, as someone who's used them like really successfully, yeah, there is the like long-term wealth effect of not owning all those properties forever, but there's a shitload better lifestyle at the end of that much sooner as well. To realize. So how can people get in contact with you if people want to sort of reach out for sort of like an introductory session where you can learn a bit more about them, they can learn a bit more about you, and maybe they want to do some planning stuff with you?
Yeah, cool. So we normally take inquiries through our website, and there's a booking form on there where they can set up a complimentary appointment to just really identify what their goals, objectives are, maybe talk a little bit about some potential strategies for them. So they can just hop on our website, which is awsadvisors.com.au. They can book in a session with one of our team. And, we just, that first session is really a get to know you, meet and greet. Do we feel comfortable moving forward together? Because ultimately, this is generally a long-term partnership. So like, I might be the smartest guy in the room. I'm not sure I am. I'm probably not. But
You are in this.
look, regardless of that, you also have to be comfortable with the human you're working with. If you're going to work with them long term, there needs to be a level of comfort and trust and familiarity. Or otherwise, it's probably not the right financial advisor for you. If someone is the smartest person in the room but dictating exactly how you need to build your wealth and not listening to your goals, probably not the right person, right? Not the right fit for you. So
Again, we've sort of talked about this. You're not taking people's money and investing it for them, and neither are we as buyer's agents. You're basically presenting ideas based on history that could have a positive wealth effect in the future, and then going, hey, like, what do you want to do? How do you feel about this? We've had clients that have bought one property with us in 10 years. We've had others that have bought 8 in 5, others that have bought 5 in 1. It just really comes down to how quickly you want choices, freedom, and your time back in your own future.
that's it. Yeah. So, we work together, we provide some clarity and direction to what they're trying to achieve, and hopefully get them on the course to that financial freedom a little bit sooner. But yeah, look, it's just about building that long-term relationship and continuing to understand how the strategy evolves, and hopefully, we achieve great things together. That's what I'm motivated by, like helping aspirational clients build out their dreams, get to things sooner. Yeah.
Man, I've loved this today. Thank you so much again for coming on. And Alex, everybody will be here hopefully more regularly to just sort of talk about some of the things that we can't, like super and structures and stocks, and in the future to be cool to talk about it, the other things that you do, like, well, you might not do, but insurances, wills, income protection, just some of the benefits of like safeguarding what you're trying to create and intergenerational wealth, and some of those more advanced concepts that as property cowboys up in Queensland we can't talk about.
Yeah, fair. Like, I think there's plenty more to come. So yeah, I'm excited for the future. Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
If you're thinking about buying an investment property in the next 3 to 6 months, then the team and I at Pumped on Property would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. To book the session, all you have to do is go to www.pumpedonproperty.com and click that free strategy session button. Now, in the session, we'll talk about exactly where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term, and educate you deeply on the Australian property market. You can then take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the small number of clients that we work with each month. Either way, we look forward to continuing to help you build your property portfolio with confidence on your journey to financial freedom.